is episode 3 of Unfuck the Poor, presented by Ask a Leftist. Get the free PDF of this audiobook, Unfuck the Poor, along with show notes, accompanying media, and all sorts of commentary on global issues like guerrilla movements and gentrification at askaleftist.com. If you don't know what you're listening to, I'll bring you up to speed. Economics is fucked. Not the economy, but the science that backs the economy. We're learning all about it here on the first season of Unfuck the Poor, which is presented as an audiobook, chapter by chapter. We've already covered the online game Roblox, learned some definitions, and have made our first dive into the GameStop clusterfuck of 2021. You have landed on chapter 2. Did you grow up watching PBS as a kid? I sure did.
Hi, I'm Bob Vila. Welcome to this old house. Hi, I'm Bob Vila. Welcome home again. Hi, I'm Bob Vila. Today is a very full day for us. Hi, I'm Bob Vila. Welcome to this old house.
Unfuck the Poor, Chapter 2, Bob Vila. We could say the 2008 housing crash started with Bob Vila hosting This Old House from 1979 to 1989. This Old House was a television show that targeted existing homeowners and showed them practical tips and hints to preserve and maintain their homes and to appreciate the beauty of, literally, old houses. After all, you've made this huge investment in owning a home, so you have to take care of it. That's great TV programming. We can't say that because Bob Vila hosted This Old House from 1979 to 1989 that the housing market picked up steam and remained relatively steady for a decade, but I mean, just look at Figure 1. New housing starts picked up in 1979 and then dropped by 1990 when Bob Vila left This Old House. Coincidence? Actually, no, I'm not fucking with you. This Old House was huge. It garnered 4 million views per episode, practically invented the phrase do-it-yourself, and earned 18 Emmy Awards with 83 nominations, and in the words of Francis Storrs, quote, premiering just as the country was sliding into a major housing crisis, This Old House, which WGBH spent a mere $50,000 to launch, would show viewers that they didn't need to buy new homes to be happy. All they needed was a little Yankee ingenuity. I'm fairly certain This Old House is why men grew beards in the 1980s. America was thirsty for lumberjacks. Home ownership has been a sound investment for white Americans since the 1950s. I'll explain that later, when incomes were higher compared to today and land, homes, and materials were more affordable relative to income. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, the middle class started to lose some buying power, but you didn't really have to sell the idea of buying homes in the 80s. Home prices were increasing, people were paying more even though the middle class was shrinking, but they could still get home loans, and more importantly, they could DIY the fuck out of their homes, meaning the investment of elbow grease offset some of the costs of ownership. By 1990, you really had to push the idea of home ownership. Home prices dropped in 1990 and continued to fade until 1997, when prices had fallen 14% from their 1989 peak. That means that people weren't buying them. It's like people were exhausted from carrying around all those beards and all that DIYing of the 1980s. By the mid-1990s, TV channels like TLC, Home and Garden, and Discovery began pouring millions of dollars into home improvement shows, encouraging people to distress their cabinets by beating them, showing homeowners that they could buy fixer-uppers to create their own dream homes, and spreading the gospel that owning a home meant absolute creative and financial freedom. And pillows. People loved couch pillows, and that's only gotten worse. Anyway, you got shows that promoted painting walls with sponges and gluing aluminum foil to cabinets, and Martha Stewart making wreaths out of straw. Basically, cable networks were propagating the idea that style was cheap and that DIY was just as good as professional labor. So everyone became a DIYer all over again, and everyone wanted a cheap home to DIY whatever the fuck they wanted. People wanted homes. After 1997, home prices and new construction went up, up, and up. People smashed cabinets and finger-painted their walls. The market dipped a little around the year 2000. Jobs had been slowly but steadily disappearing. Incomes were slowly but steadily falling relative to productivity, but people went right back to buying houses. Their incomes hadn't changed. The market hadn't really changed. They weren't any better off. Initially, banks were like, you guys are poor, sorry. Then some genius was like, wait, even though they're poor, we can still take their money. Light bulbs lit up all over Wall Street. What if we loan money to poor people while interest rates are low at a monthly payment they can afford, but then later, when interest rates go up, we charge them more, and then when they can't pay, we take their houses? Oh, bankers cheered. They were so fucking happy. They handed out loans to everyone who could afford the lower monthly payment, but on the condition that they do so with an adjustable rate mortgage. The thinking goes like this: right now you're poor and can only afford this much, but once you have your home, you bash some cabinets and do some finger painting, you'll probably be making more money. So if the interest rates go up, you'll be able to afford it. Bonus, if interest rates go down, you'll pay less and the value of your home will just continue to increase. Mortgage banks also had a bunch of subsidy and piggyback schemes to get money into the hands of people who didn't have money so they could get mortgages. A subsidy is a cash handout. You take a subsidy, you are receiving cash or something equal to cash like a tax deduction or a cash equivalent from the government or a bank. Sometimes you have to pay it back. A piggyback is a loan on top of a loan. If you don't have cash for a down payment on a mortgage, you can piggyback a small loan on top of the mortgage, and then the down payment is lower or zero if you are also getting a subsidy. It's free money, so what could go wrong? Okay, let's talk about mortgages and interest rates. You take out a loan, you have to pay it back with interest, and a loan to buy a house is a mortgage. Interest is the cost of borrowing money. You have to pay back the value of the loan plus interest. The interest you pay is called the rate, and the rate is set by whatever the market says it is, 3%, 5%, 7.54%, something. To buy a house, you might wind up with a $200,000 mortgage at 5% interest. Those are completely made-up numbers. Interest rates move up and down, so rationally, logically, you want to lock in a lower rate because that means lower monthly payments. But if you agree to an adjustable rate, that means you're not locked into anything. It means right now you're paying this interest rate, but when the rate changes, you'll be paying that interest rate. Adjustable rate mortgage, or ARM. Let's go back to the rational humans economists say we should be. A rational human would look at an adjustable rate mortgage and say, well, right now I can afford the lower rate, but if it increases, I might not be able to afford it. A skeptical human would look at an ARM and say, no deal, fuckwad. But what if the lender, the person selling you the mortgage, sold you on a few ideas? 1, the economy is doing well. 2, you are at least employed and can expect to stay employed and get pay increases. 3, the interest rate could go down. 4, you might be able to refinance after a period of time and get a fixed interest rate that won't change. 5, you're getting a great deal on this house. And 6, we are the only lender who will give you a loan, and this is the only loan we're going to offer you. Well, now what should a rational human do? In the post-2008 financial autopsy of everything that went wrong, economists said that rational humans should not have taken out loans if they couldn't afford them. These are the same economists who said that they weren't sure that these loans, or even the whole mid-2000s boom, would be bad for the economy. In fact, in 2006, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC, an independent organization created by Congress to, quote, maintain stability and public confidence in the nation's financial system, said that banks were in great shape to deal with an upcoming recession, which was definitely going to happen, but they weren't sure why. In the same FDIC report, 2 very important things were brought to light. 1, the FDIC knew that a lot of borrowers who had taken out innovative mortgages did not really know how they worked and would likely get into trouble. Quote, not only do many borrowers in this group have pre-existing credit problems, they may also be more vulnerable than other groups to rising interest rates because of their reliance on interest-only and payment option mortgages. These types of mortgages have the potential for significant payment shock that occurs when low introductory interest rates expire, when index rates rise, or when these loans eventually begin to require regular amortization of principal, including any deferred interest that has accrued. End quote. 2, no matter what, the banks were going to be okay, so no need to worry about the recession that was definitely going to happen soon for some unknown reason. Quote, Given its strong current financial position, the banking industry appears to be generally well positioned to meet the challenges of the next recession. Strong underwriting practices, effective management of loan concentrations, proper servicing procedures, and well-designed policies to hedge against market volatility were all cited as essential risk management tools for the industry. The true test of these industry practices will occur down the road when the recession scenario finally becomes a reality, end quote. In February, March, and May of 2005, the FDIC issued 3 reports on housing, 2 on housing booms and busts, and the third on tapping into the, quote, Hispanic market. You know, how to navigate around tricky things like bad credit, visas, social security numbers, and immigration status. Quote, bankers that want to tap into more of the growing Hispanic market can also offer other services, such as liberalized loan underwriting standards, down payment assistance, and mortgage rate subsidies. These services have somewhat higher costs and risks. However, there is recent evidence that shows that lower prepayment risk tends to offset the higher default risk. Individual bankers should assess what will work best for them. Either way, bankers who successfully tap into this growing market will have an opportunity to gain new customers, expand their mortgage portfolios, and, over the long term, make a positive impact on their communities and the nation's economy. End quote. The FDIC was keenly aware that something was going on in the housing market. They looked at the housing market closely, analyzed it, analyzed historical recessions, and concluded that if the housing boom slowed, it should just slow. It should not collapse. The FDIC was not concerned that borrowers were going to default. In fact, they knew they would default and didn't discourage the issuance of those innovative mortgages. They also recommended those very same innovative mortgages they would later warn against. Don't worry, they were definitely ready for a recession. So, what is a recession, a boom, a bust, and a bubble? If a recess is a fun break in the middle of the school day where you play Avengers with your friends, a recession is a fun break in the economy where you can live in your car at a public park and play Captain America with bologna sticks and greasy cardboard. The difference between a recession and a depression, like the Great Depression in 1929, is literally just the time you spend living in your car. We've only had one depression is definitely something people say, and they are lying. I refer you again to the earlier figure 1. The 2008 crash created a 7-year, quote, recession, also known as a depression, and it was created entirely by the banking industry, and they're the ones who say it was just a recession. It wasn't that bad. In fact, it was worse. A boom is a period of growth. There are jobs, there is money, and most importantly, there is the promise of more money. People invest, but also prices increase. A bust is the end of a boom. People start losing jobs, money is tight, and most importantly, the promise of more money has faded. People save. Prices are still high, but no one can afford them, and because no one can afford anything, prices drop, causing a recession. A large bust is known as a recession. A lot of people lose their jobs, people lose their homes, careers end, savings are lost. Bad or no investments, little or no savings to fall back on. A bubble is hard to explain, and that's why everyone uses the word. They think they know what it is, but they don't, so they just say it over and over and over again until it becomes so common that everyone knows what it is, but really they're just dumb. In fact, some economists say bubbles don't exist, that the bubble phenomenon is really just how the whole market works. Prices go up, prices go down. Sometimes prices skyrocket, and sometimes they tank. A bubble is, in theory, when the price rises or inflates, like blowing air into a balloon, far above the actual value of whatever you're talking about. Okay, back to GameStop. I bet you thought I forgot about GameStop. If GameStop shares are selling at $17, but the price goes up to $20, is that a bubble? That is technically just a market fluctuation because the economist's definition of a bubble is when the price far exceeds its real value. So who gets to decide when that price far exceeds its value? I honestly don't know. There's no real guidance for this. But to put it into perspective, let's use big, simple numbers. If GameStop has issued 1 million shares of stock to the public and they are currently worth $17, that is a total value or market cap of $17 million. If the price goes to $20, then obviously the market cap goes up to $20 million. So in my mind, a $3 million increase in total value for presumably no reason is a pretty excessive climb. Fair enough. If it jumps from, say, 17 million to 500 million, that's bonkers. These numbers are just examples. I made them all up. But imagine you were betting on the price to drop to, say, $10 a share. If you were short selling, all you'd have to do is wait it out. After all, the company ain't doing great and it's just a matter of time. Borrow 1 million shares and sell them at $17, wait for the price to reach 10, and in our example above, buy back the shares at $10 and make a cool 7 million. Neat. Add some zeros, substitute U for hedge fund managers, and instead of making money, subtract 20 billion from your account and you have GameStop. Neat. The investors responsible for inflating the price are also responsible for its volatility. Can it maintain a $500 price tag? $500 a share for a failing business is pretty risky. So if you get out at 500, you're making bank, but then everyone wants out at 500 because everyone wants to make bank too. And the price falls really, really fast. If you believe in bubbles, that really, really fast decline in value is the bubble bursting. It makes a sound like this.
I've made a huge mistake.
However, the inverse must also be true. The investors shorting the stock and then releasing damning evidence of fraud or abuse like Andrew Left are also responsible for its volatility. In the case of GameStop, the sound of the bubble bursting actually made this sound.
Fuck Wall Street. All right.
And the sound made by short sellers went like this.
And this fair share is a bullshit concept. It's just a way of attacking wealthy people.
Wait. What the fuck is a hedge fund, and why is it so fun to be like,
fuck Wall Street, all right?
No matter how many pairs of Sperry's and Dorigos we own, you and I will simply never be hedge fund managers. We'll go with the very basics of hedge funding. To hedge a bet is to reduce one's losses. To hedge a bet in sports is to make multiple bets to guarantee a profit. And hedging in economics means using derivatives to offset losses in one investment with gains in another investment. Derivatives in economics is a contract between multiple parties, like organizations, cartels, or governments, whose value is based on something else, like a security. And the plain English definition for derivative is not original or secondary. Wait for it. If a security is something worth money and a derivative is something whose value is based on a security, let's do instead a word diagram. If you convert money to Air Force Ones or a security, you can convert that to a contract to do something with Air Force Ones, and that would be a derivative. So the derivative contract is equal to the value of the security, which is equal to the value of the money. So a derivative is just another form of security, something worth money but not actually money, but its value is derived from the value of the original security. So how do derivatives work? Say you're converting $100 bills to Air Force Ones, and it's pretty clear that in 1 year, people are still going to want Air Force Ones. I'm looking for a way to stabilize my money for the long term, and I think, hey, I wonder if I can buy the guarantee of a pair of Air Force Ones a year from now at today's price. That's a solid plan. So say I approach you with the following deal. Hey, I will pay you $100 for a pair of Air Force Ones, but I want that pair in a year. Deal? Sure, hell, why not? It's probably going to cost $100 to hold them, $1 to store them, and $3 for my other troubles. So let's make it $105. Where do I sign? Right here on my derivative. 1 year later, I give you $105 and I get a pair of Air Force Ones that you are now selling for, say, $110. I haven't technically made money, but I could. I could sell the shoes and make $5. I could also, in theory, borrow money against the value of our contract. I anticipated the future value of a product and guaranteed the right to buy it at today's price. That is a futures contract. What if you have a bunch of folks asking you all sorts of questions about your shoes and wanting to get in on the action? You'll probably want to simplify or standardize things. Tell you what, I'll bundle 5 pairs of shoes in a contract. You want 25 shoes, you gotta buy 5 contracts. You know how sometimes opposite things are the same, like war is peace and peace is war, or love is hate and hate is love? You can't get to one without crossing the threshold of the other, and in order to understand the value of one, you have to know the pain of the other. Love hurts, peace brings mundanity, war brings longing for mundanity, hate is the bitter reminder of love that's gone. That's derivatives trading. Sellers put together contracts for buyers to hop onto, they create a derivatives market, and buyers put together contracts for sellers looking to offload something. It's a push-pull thing. People are deriving value from the future prices of things compared to their prices today. And they can, in theory, borrow money against that future value. So what if you really, really like shoes? Maybe you're buying 10 Air Force One contracts here and 25 Sperry contracts there, 30 Balenciaga contracts. You have a portfolio full of contracts, thousands of contracts all revolving around shoes, and damn it, you are shoe rich. When it comes time to cash in on all these contracts, what if you opened up the first shoebox? It says Nike right on the lid, and lo and behold, there's really a pair of Walgreens flip-flops where some Air Force Ones should be. Well, that's not good. The next box, flip-flops. You've got a warehouse full of flippy floppies, and so you go back to the guy who sold you the worthless contract. Okay, this sucks because all his money is also tied up in worthless flip-flops. Somewhere along the way, someone in a factory was like, hey, no one is really using these Air Force Ones, and I get paid based on how many boxes I get out the door, so I don't think anyone would mind if I just toss some flip-flops in there. Just a few at first, but then they realize, hey, seriously, no one is paying attention to these fucking flip-flops. Now imagine that all over the shoe warehouse employees are like, hey guys, they're paying for flip-flops. It's a goddamn flip-flop-a-palooza. Okay, now imagine that because you had bought all these promises of Air Force Ones and Balenciagas, you borrowed money based on their value. It's not just you, though. You ask all your shoe buddies, hey, are your boxes filled with flip-flops? No, these are Air Force Ones. Maybe you should open the box. Dear God, flip-flops. Now you and all your buddies start getting phone calls from people you borrowed money from. You borrowed money based on the value of fancy shoes, but your flip-flops are worthless. The guy you bought the flip-flops from is filing for bankruptcy because, well, not only does he not have the shoes, he also borrowed money based on the value of the shoes he thought he had. And it turns out that all the money has simply vanished. Oof. What do you call a perfect grade A cut of meat? A prime cut. If you're not into meat, maybe you call a 100% organic, free trade, fair labor, locally roasted coffee a prime roast. I don't really know. Anyway, top tier stuff earns the designation prime. What about stuff less than prime? Second rate? Grade B? Mid-grade? Common? Fair? Mediocre? Unexceptional? If you're a mortgage broker, how would you classify a fixed-rate mortgage taken out by someone with low debt, high income, great credit history, cash down payment, and solid job history? That's a prime mortgage in my book. If you're a mortgage broker, how would you classify an adjustable-rate mortgage taken out by someone with high debt, no down payment or collateral, no savings, mediocre income, and spotty job history? For me, and maybe this is just me, that would deserve a name like high risk, low security, mid-grade, low grade, something to designate that they are not very good. If you're a mortgage broker who is very smart and knows all sorts of definitions like puts, options, calls, derivatives, and gamma squeezes, you probably have the perfect name for something so risky. Or you just call it subprime, under prime. There's no qualification there, kind of like there's no real qualification for what makes a bubble. Sure, the price far exceeds the value, but how far is far and how sub are these subprime mortgages? It doesn't matter because for the economist and the mortgage broker, a subprime mortgage is simply a higher risk than a prime mortgage. Buyer beware, I guess. You assume a level of risk with a subprime mortgage regardless of how far below prime it is. We have not yet fully defined collateralized debt obligations because, actually we kind of already have, we talked about derivatives, which is all a CDO is, a bundle of loans and assets sold to financial institutions or banks. But financial institutions and banks are separate, so just financial institutions. Collateral is something of value that gets taken in the event that you lose a bet. You might not have the cash, but you have the collateral, something worth money, also known as a security. So you see, a collateralized debt obligation is a derivative, which is a contract on securities, which in this case is a mortgage, which in this case, the house itself is collateral. CDOs are not just mortgages. They can be packages of all sorts of debt: car loans, credit card debt, mortgages, and corporate debt. Remember, stocks or equity and bonds debt are types of securities, and corporate bonds are basically payday loans for corporations to raise capital. You know what? Fuck it. Let's go full tilt and just discuss tranches while we're at it. If you have a shitload of mortgages bundled up as CDOs, you may as well organize them. Turn all those packages of mortgages into products to sell. So you divide them up. You make a stack of loans that mature in 30 years at 5% interest, a stack that matures in 30 years at 6%, on and on until you have a bunch of stacks of loans at different interest rates and maturation. Those are tranches, the organized bundles of shitty flip-flop mortgages. Are you seeing how economic language works yet? It is very specific except when it isn't. A financial instrument is a real or virtual document that legally represents something of value. A mortgage would be technically a financial instrument. Bundling mortgages together and selling them as derivatives or using a contract is another instrument. Is a dollar bill a financial instrument? In the strictest sense, yes, it says so right on the bill. This note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. If someone says something costs $1 and you show up with a $1 bill, then you have a financial instrument that says it is legally worth $1, whatever $1 really is, which we'll talk about later. And you can trade the bill for the thing, and now technically you have a security instead of $1, assuming you can still sell the thing for $1. Everything that takes place in financial institutions exchanges something of value for something that represents that value. If the initial thing of value is really worthless, then everything all the way down the line is equally worthless. Even though bankers, investors, and economists come up with a bunch of graphs, charts, and definitions, what they're really getting at is how the value of $1 increases or decreases over time through manipulation, hope, promises, and general sorcery, or the stock market. What happened in 2008 was all the hedge fund managers finally looked into the boxes that said Air Force Ones on them and found a bunch of shitty flip-flops. Every transaction that took place around the value of Air Force Ones was now valued at the price of flip-flops. Banks took out loans based on the value of Air Force Ones, but only had flip-flop money to pay it back. So, to sum up everything we just learned, the events of 2008 have been described as the subprime lending crisis. High-risk home loans, those would be the subprime mortgages, were bundled with low-risk loans, those would be the prime mortgages, creating CDOs of mortgage-backed securities. And remember, we used Air Force Ones to back the value of $100. Those CDOs were cut up into tranches. All of this is generalized as derivatives, contracts of future value, that were traded and sold. Banks did this to the extreme, with trillions of dollars tied up in derivative schemes and even borrowing money against the value of the mortgage-backed securities. And remember, the FDIC knew there was a problem with the abundance of subprime loans. They encouraged banks to tap into at least one high-risk market, and they knew that a recession was coming. But they were confident that the banks had it all figured out because they had complex policies, savings, and schemes in place to protect themselves. Unfortunately, most of those schemes involved the value of those mortgages. Now, when the game of hot potato came to an abrupt halt and home values plummeted, when homeowners defaulted on their mortgages, meaning they missed payments and lost ownership, and the extent of the subprime crisis became known, who do you think was blamed for this shit show? The mortgage bankers that issued subprime mortgages, the financial institutions that packaged them and sold them as grade A derivatives, the FDIC who knew there was a problem but said don't worry about it while encouraging subprime lending to new markets? Nah, dude. It was the 10 million homeowners who had spent the last decade bashing their cabinets with chains and decorating their cheap homes with hundreds of throw pillows and filling glass vases with lemons and hanging "home is where the wine is" signs in their kitchens while, indeed, drinking wine in vast quantities while their home values tanked and their mortgage payments ballooned. Alcohol consumption actually lowered during the Great Recession, but binge drinking increased, especially among black unmarried men aged 30 and under. Again, it was a depression that we are still recovering from. Anyway, we blamed the people who for 20 years had been bombarded with television images of dream homes made possible through DIY, hot glue, wallpaper, beards, plaid, and pillows. So many pillows. Bombarded with the dream of home ownership without the slightest understanding of the risks of the loans they had taken out. To some economists, the people were indeed responsible for the crash. They had acted irrationally, taking out loans they couldn't afford, and then, of course, defaulting. The market, however, acted in good faith. After all, there were so many loans to trade and leverage for cash, the financial institutions did what any logical, rational human would do. They swooped in and gobbled up all these mortgages and traded them, leveraged them, optioned them, and maximized their value. Everything would have worked out in the end if, in the end, houses had maintained their values and the people paid their mortgages. The real victims were the banks. They made the right bets because the market should have worked out in their favor. Oh, also, the government was to blame for the crash. That's important, but not yet. This was Chapter 2 of Unfuck the Poor, and we're just starting to dig into how the poor, working class, and minorities take most of the blame for economics failings. In the next chapter, we look at the defenders of low and moderate income workers who warned our elected officials about the dangers of subprime and predatory lending. Spoiler alert, our elected officials didn't give a shit. Check out askaleftist.com for more material, and just as an editorial, I did do math wrong in this episode, so let's see if you caught it.